Hey, you know, I'm a little concerned about our law enforcement. You know, some that these kinds of things raised up here and nobody knows.
You know, you bring all that.
Can we call Joe on the road?
Coyote.
No, that's true. All right, welcome everyone to the regular session of the Town Council. Please rise for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for invocation. Reverend Bill Good from Presbyterian Church, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming forward up by the mic so we can all hear you on Channel 11 as well and see your beautiful smiling face.
Well, thank you for having me. Let us pray. Creating and sustaining Spirit, we are gathered here this evening to be about the work of continuing the establishment of a just and safe community, one in which your people in all their diversity can live their lives in equity of person and opportunity, security of home and hope, and peace of being and circumstance. As we prepare to begin our work here in this moment, we offer to you, O Sovereign One, our praise and thanksgiving for all you have done and are yet doing in our Fountain Hills community. Even though we experience you in many and varied ways and we hear you in many and varied voices, we also acknowledge and celebrate those things which we hold in common. The awareness that we are here at your call and claim. The recognition that the best we are is a product of your hand and your love. And the knowledge that this higher work to which we aspire here is surely a response to all the goodness we have learned from your actions in and with our lives and our world. May our thoughts and decision this night seek to imitate your bent for order, for fairness, for justice, and for compassion. We ask now that you would spread your Spirit among us, and that under its unifying influence we would act in integrity and humility as your emissaries in Fountain Hills. Grant us, we ask, a measure of wisdom and discernment, a measure of civility and respect for all, and an extra measure of the will to speak harmony into dissonance and peace into power. We each pray this to you in keeping with our own faith traditions, asking only that you excuse our timidity in speaking your name boldly and plainly, as a mark of our deep desire to share those things with which you bind us together, rather than those with which we hold ourselves apart. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend Good. From Fountain Hills Presbyterian Church, thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Schlum.
Here.
Councilmember Cantino is absent. Vice Mayor Dickey. Here. Councilmember Elke.
Here.
Councilmember Hanson. Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Leger.
Here.
All right, next item on our agenda is scheduled appearance presentation by Mr. Craig Clifford of PFM Asset Management on the town's investment portfolio as of November 2011. How are you, sir?
Good.
Nice to see you again.
Thank you, Mayor. Julie asked me to come and give you a little brief update on what our company's done with your initial purchases since we contracted with the town. And so I have a few slides to go through for you. Initially, the town has adopted an investment policy, and this is all verbatim from your policy, with three key objectives for any public assets, and that's safety first, preservation of principal, so you don't lose any dollars of taxpayer monies. Liquidity is a second priority, so that you have enough money to pay your bills and take care of business. And a third, and in this particular order, yield. So yield is not the first priority. It's only after the first two objectives, which are the higher priorities, are met. And if you recall, before hiring PFM, the town had its investments in the state investment pool. The state investment pool operates like a money market fund. Its investment duration has to average by SEC rules under 60 days. So while it was very liquid and very safe, it was very short term, so there was virtually no yield in this current market. So what we've done, we began purchasing investments using the money that you had invested in a pool. We purchased individual securities, and I should add in between, I worked with the town and secured a third-party custody bank to hold the assets. They're held in your name at the third-party bank. We only operate as a independent advisor for the town. So we began making those purchases in October and purchased just under $15 million of separate securities. Majority of them are federal agency sector, some treasuries, and we favored a duration on the yield curve out at about 1.5 to 3 years. And we'll be benchmarking our performance in the future to all securities to a 1 to 3 year performance index for treasuries so that we can track how well we're doing and you can track how well we're doing to the market. Oops. Press the wrong button. Hold on.
Hit escape.
Here we go. The portfolio composition, you'll see a spread about 20% in actual U.S. Treasuries, the safest assets we can buy. The remainder is in federal agencies, a slight amount in this FDIC guaranteed note. What that is some assets that remain from the 2008 that the Fed marketed during the bailout. They're FDIC insured, so they're effectively like federal agencies, very secure assets, and those securities will end at June of 2012. And then the residual money is in a money market fund. The portfolio represents the highest quality. You'll see that we'd like to say it was all AAA. The only reason it's not AAA is because S&P downgraded the U.S. government. That's the only reason you're not seeing it. So we have to abide by the lowest rating, even though Moody's still has the U.S. at AAA. You'll see in the current yield curve, because of Treasury actions and all, and a pledge to keep rates low through mid-2013, the short end of the yield curve, including the state investment pool, is yielding near zero. In fact, the state investment pool is at today's yield was 0.8%, or 8 basis points. So what we've done is available cash that's not necessary for the town's operational needs on a regular basis. We've moved out a little bit further, 1 to 3 years duration-wise, and with that it picks up additional yield on the yield curve. Looking at the fourth quarter, the economy went through a lot of turbulence, particularly in August with the July and August with the U.S. government struggling with their debt issues, and then you probably about every day you're reading something about Europe and what's going on there. And with all of those actions and the downgrade of the U.S. government, there's been a rush to quality, which in spite of us being downgraded, U.S. Treasury securities and agencies are still the most secure asset out there worldwide, so more people buy them. It's brought down yields because of the heavy purchasing going on. Since that time, the Feds have taken what we like to call QE3, like the third action they've talked about. They've nicknamed it Operation Twist. The reason for that is the last time they did this was back in the 60s, and it was named after the dance. Interestingly, that's the only reason it has that name. But what they're doing is they're buying long-term securities and selling short-term securities. The idea being that they'll keep credit available and low cost to try to stimulate the economy. It's doing that. It's bringing down those long-term rates. Unfortunately, it doesn't bode well for those that are trying to invest and try to earn some money. But that's what's going on right now. So we're seeing record low yields in the market, historical low yields. Nevertheless, we did purchase those high-valued securities for you, adhering to safety of principle. And what we do for you as an independent advisor is we'll also actively manage the portfolio. So instead of buying these, principally we'll buy these securities and hold them to maturity. But our portfolio managers do review the portfolio and the market on a daily basis. That's their job. That's what we do. So if there's an opportunity with changing interest rates or economic data, changing market outlook, we'll look for opportunities to try to improve the holdings in the portfolio. And by that, I think I've got an example in here. Since we bought those securities, we did execute one trade at the tail end of November, and here's an example where we sold one of the initial purchases that had a maturity of November of 2012 and purchased a new agency that has a little longer maturity, so it moved it out a little bit further on the duration curve and improved the yield by about 37 basis points, 1/3%. So that's kind of what we do. We call it active management. We don't get paid for doing these things. We get paid based upon your total portfolio under management, so we don't have any transactional fees. That's not the way we operate. We do this to do our jobs well and to try to stick to performance indexes and make sure you're yielding as best as we can in a safe manner and still meeting your liquidity needs. And of course, all the securities we're buying based upon your investment policy are highly marketable. If there's any issues, there's always a market for them. They're very secure, and that's what everyone's buying these days given what's happening in Europe. So with that, we have all of these alphabet soups of those agencies. I thought I'd throw in some definitions if you're interested, but those are all the agencies. Many of these had an implied guarantee from the federal government, but after 2008, the actions they took, they have an explicit guarantee. So they're effectively as good as agencies, or as good as treasuries. The one added thing is they do carry a slightly better yield in most cases, and so that's why we favor them. Unless the yield differential isn't there, we'll still buy treasuries, which is their safest asset. So I think that's all I had. If you've got any questions, I'll try to answer them for you.
Thanks, Mr. Clifford. Any questions from council? Julie, anything more? All right, thanks so much for giving us a heads up as where we're at currently.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I'll now open up the call to the public. Do we have anyone who wants to
Yes,
speak?
Mayor, Linda Bardell.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Ms. Bordeaux.
Hi, good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I have a quick question about what the financial gentleman just said. I want to make sure I understand this. Do we have 37% of our assets in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? I think what I saw, and I'm not a financial person, but he sold $850,000 in Citibank or Citigroup FDIC insured instrument and put it into Freddie Mac. Is that correct?
I think
Is that what you said?
it's all right, Andrew.
This is not what I wanted to talk about, but I was just,
And perhaps why don't you finish up your time
Okay.
and comments, and then perhaps we can ask a
okay.
question or two.
It
Thank
just
you.
makes me concerned because they're now continuing to ask for more government bailout money, so they're a little shaky, so I'm a little concerned about that investment. Why I came up here to talk was at the last work study session, we learned that the fire department needs refurbishing and to the tune of around $400,000. And at the end of the meeting, I had a chance to talk to the chief, and I think that we can come up with some ideas on how to raise some of that money. We have, I don't know if I'm going to be here long enough to hear what the SPAC has to say, but one of their missions is to help get the community involved with, keeping our streets up to date and our fire and our police and all of that, and I think it's a great idea. We also have low income into the town with our businesses and so on and so forth. So I thought we could come up with a number of different ways to sort of parlay advertising the town and marketing the town, as well as raising money for the fire department. We have amazing trails. I don't take advantage of them because I really can't walk that far. But we have amazing trails. We have a lot of cycling that goes on here. We have great golf courses. We might be able to pull in golfers like Phil Mickelson from Scottsdale. We could do things with our youth. We could have the music nights with the high school band and the middle school band. We have a lot of musicians and so forth in town. We could do events like that. I'm pretty sure, not positive, but I would like to think the paper would donate ad space to go ahead and advertise things like the events that are upcoming, all in the name of promoting charity for the firehouse. Being a former Marine, I have some sympathy for what the female fire person must go through having to cohabitate in such a small space with the guys. Granted, they're easy on the eyes, but after a short period of time, it gets tired. So I think with what we have as resources in our town, a way to promote our town, I think a story like that could make not only local news, but it might even go national at a time when most municipalities, cities, towns, states even are on the verge of bankruptcy and looking for money. There's a lot of resources that we have here, local artists that we might pull together, team up with the council, the Strategic Planning Commission, and our citizenry to do all of those things, promote the town, bring in the business, not only for the local event, but maybe would fan out to, and my timer's up, to local businesses as well. Some of the restaurants could take advantage. So unfortunately, I couldn't get a hold of the chief today. I tried twice. They were out on calls. I hope everyone they were helping is okay. But I'd like to partner with you folks, and I'd like to offer up any ideas that you have. You've obviously done this longer than I have, of ways that we can form that out, ways we can flesh that out. And I know I'm over time, so thank you for letting me finish my thoughts, and thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Bordeaux. Is that it for Call the Public? Andrew or staff, any way to speak to the one item brought up regarding the agendized item about finances to clarify on? Was Ms. Bordeaux brought up?
Mr. Mayor, because it was just a presentation, you can ask him to come back up and clarify some of that.
Yeah, thanks. All right. Would you mind coming up again, sir? Mr. Clifford, I don't know if you heard the question about the investment. If you could answer it to the best of your extent.
The best I can say is yes, they are. We have made purchases per the town's investment policy and federal agencies, and all of the agencies, including Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, are explicitly guaranteed by the full faith and credit of our federal government. And while there has been some money spent by the federal government during a housing crisis, we're not buying mortgage-backed securities. These are all bonds issued by these agencies, direct bonds financing the backing, and they're fully guaranteed by the federal government. And they have a AA+ rating by Standard & Poor's and AAA rating by Moody's.
Okay. I think some people see some of those acronyms, and it can be concerning. And Julie, anything related to that you want to add? Or
No, Mayor, other than, we have an investment policy that the priority is safety of principal. So the investment advisors understand that we're not going to risk any of our money, that the principal has to be guaranteed before they invest. So.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. And move on to the consent items. We have 6 items on consent. I'll go through them and look for a motion. First item is consideration of approving the town council meeting minutes from November 17 and December 1, 2011. Item 2 is consideration of authorizing payment to Maricopa County Elections Department in accordance with the IGA for direct support of the town of Fountain Hills November 8th election, amount of $34,808.28, and for reimbursement of expenses incurred by the Maricopa County Recorder and certifying signatures as reported by state law in the amount of $151.6150. And relating to recall petitions, 2011-RC001-01, $777, and recall petition 2011-RC002-01 for $784.50. Item 3, consideration of approving special event liquor license application submitted by Valerie Stasic, represented the Fountain Hills Theater, Inc., for the purpose of a New Year's Bash to be held at 11445 North Saguaro Boulevard on Saturday, December 31st. That's good to have a New Year's party then, from 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. Number 4, consideration of approving resolution 2011-49, abandoning whatever right, title, and interest the town has in certain provisions of a 10-foot public utility easement, drainage easement, located at the rear property of Plat 601-B, Block 2, Lot 6, 15852 East Ponderosa Drive, as recorded in Block 166 of map page 31. Maricopa County, Arizona with stipulations, EA 11-05 Viking Construction Incorporated. Item 5, consideration of approval of resolution 2011-44, abandoning whatever right, title, interest the town has a certain portion of a 20-foot public utility drainage easement located at her property of 15202 North Peachtree in block 155, maps page 24, recorded Maricopa County, EA 11-07 Carlisle. And item 6, consideration temporary use permit for Diane Zerinski and Dixie Green Promotions at Plaza Fountainside, located at 12645 North Sorrel Boulevard, for repeating outdoor retail sales events for 2012 case TU 2011-08. Can I get a motion? Second?
Second.
Roll call.
Vice Mayor Dickey?
Aye.
Mayor Slum?
Aye.
Councilmember Leger?
Aye.
Councilmember Hanson?
Aye.
Councilmember Brown?
Aye.
Councilmember Elke?
Aye.
Mayor 6-0.
Thank you very much. I think that, New Year's comes with changes. I think maybe we'll have different council members rotate on who reads the consent agenda each council meeting. See, then we'll have it, we can do it the fastest and the clearest and the best. That was a wordy one. All right, on to regular agenda items. Item 7 is consideration of appointing one citizen to serve on the Public Safety Advisory Commission for the remainder of a 2-year term beginning December 15, 2011 and ending October 31st, 2013. I move to appoint Howie Jones. Can I get a second?
Second.
Any speaker cards here?
No, sir.
Any discussion? All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mayor 6-0.
Thank you much. I'm not sure, is Mr. Jones here tonight? Otherwise, if you're watching, or if you know Howie, thank him for stepping up to serve on our Public Safety Advisory Commission, and we wish him the best of luck in serving on our PSAC. So thank you, Mr. Jones. Item 8, consideration of accepting a bronze sculpture titled Lincoln and approving the placement. Mark. How are you doing, Mark?
Fine.
Good.
Bear with me a second. Mayor Slum, members of the council. I have for you tonight consideration of a potential new public art piece. And as I showed in the document that I provided to you, it is a piece that would go in the corner of Fountain Park, and there's a map there that locates that specifically for you. You may recall at this particular location, we already have a piece that was donated a couple years ago of Teddy Roosevelt, so the location is certainly apropos. This would be directly across the sidewalk and facing Saguaro Avenue. We think it would be a nice addition to the collection and certainly fits in that particular area. This particular piece was, the sculptor for this piece was Mark Lundin, or Lundin is probably a better way to pronounce it, with a listed price of $45,000, and as I indicated down here, the annual insurance costs are $193.50. Because the item is a donated piece, the cost of the piece, the plaque, and the installation costs are borne by the donors, not by the town of Fountain Hills. It is certainly a timely piece. I was informed tonight that 2011 is the 150th anniversary of the Civil War. So apparently the document that Lincoln is reading is a parchment from a speech that he had put together. So there's certainly some history significance to the piece as well. So, and with our centennial next year, it seems certainly fitting. So with that, I would be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. All right, council, we can get a motion to accept this piece.
Mayor, motion to accept the bronze sculpture titled Lincoln and approving the placement location.
Thank you. And a second. Good. Any questions, council? Anyone from the public on this item?
No, sir.
All right, this is excellent, Mark. It looks like a great piece and
It is.
a little presidential row over there in the North Dakota section.
I should also mention Mr. Roy Nichols from the Public Art Committee is also here this evening if you have any questions perhaps of him.
Mr. Nichols, do you have anything to add tonight?
No, I was hoping it was only 25,000, but I believe it's 30. That we're having to raise.
All right.
He also is actively soliciting donations. Is that fair to say? Okay.
Mayor, can we have him? Can we have him?
Yeah, Mr. Nichols. Mr. Nichols, come on up and mention into the microphone what you may have just shared. So others that may want to participate in the public art that we have in our beautiful town might be...
Well, I have to say that the Times has been very outstanding for me, and it's advertised our efforts already. And we only started a little less than a month ago. We do have quite a few donors that have already shown interest. Some people, if you want me to speak longer than this, but some people are wanting to donate, but in small quantities. And I'll say this to the public: it's impossible to pick up $20 here and $20 there and $50 there. We have to set limits on what size donations we can accept, mainly to be able to honor them on the plaque that we provide. So we're accepting donations of $500, $1,000, $2,500, and $5,000, and that's described on the donor handout. And truly, I do have them here for you tonight, and I wouldn't want to go without giving you an opportunity to have one in your hand. So maybe I could just leave them with you.
And folks online watching or on television, how do they go to the Civic?
It's right here, and it was in the paper yesterday. You can contact me, Roy Nickel, at 816-0229, and I'll give you a form either through the email or whichever way. But the biggest thing is to get everybody on board, and I have not gotten any negative feelings whatsoever about this. So I'm excited about it. I think it would be nice someday, if you're really looking down the road, to make a Rushmore of Fountain Hills. We can do another one after this. So I hope you would partake.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Elke.
Roy, I just want to make sure clear, you indicated that in order to get your name on the plaque, the minimum donation is $500, but if someone were to donate, say, $100 to you, you'd certainly not turn that.
I would accept any donations, but I do have to clarify that when I accept them,
Sure.
because otherwise people are offended, and that's the last thing I want to have.
So you'll take anything, but to get,
Oh,
your,
yes.
name on, get
Sure.
your name on the plaque, you need
Sure.
500 or...
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, and thanks so much for volunteering
Okay.
in this effort.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, council, any other dialogue on Lincoln? Yeah, I have your picture sitting next to Lincoln. Yeah, neat. All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye, opposed?
Mayor 6-0.
Thank you. Item 9, discussion possible direction staff regarding a funding request for the capital improvement project contingency line item in amount of $27,767.55 for an unbudgeted item by the Fountain Hills Library Association for reimbursement of capital outlay costs for new carpeting in the town library. Julie.
Thank you, Mayor. The Fountain Hills Library Building is owned by the town, but it's managed by the Maricopa County Library District. Per the intergovernmental agreement with the county, the town is responsible for maintenance and improvements to the building. The Fountain Hills Library Association, it's a nonprofit organization of volunteers who are dedicated in assisting in the support of programs, facilities, and activities of the Fountain Hills Library. Last year, the association funded the renovation of the library conference room at a cost of $62,600, and most recently had new carpeting installed in the building at a cost of $55,000. And the board of the association voted in May to donate the carpet replacement to the town, but is requesting reimbursement from the town for half of the cost of the carpeting. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions from the council.
Good, thank you very much. All right, council, can I get a motion on this item? Councilman Dickey, do you want to second that motion to approve the reimbursement? All right, there we go. Anybody from the public on this item, Bev?
No, sir.
All right. Any questions for staff on this item?
Mayor,
Councilmember Leger.
if I may address Julie. Julie, in the staff report, it states that this will be from our capital fund in the contingency fund, and the contingency fund balance currently today is what?
Mayor, Councilmember Leger, the contingency amount is about $169,000 before, if this is approved, it will come out of that $169,000.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks so much. Any other questions, comments? All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye, opposed?
Mayor 6-0.
Thank you very much. Item number 10, discussion possible direction of staff regarding a funding request in the amount of $2,250 for an unbudgeted item by Arizona Business Advisors represented by Mike Tyler relating to the establishment of a virtual business incubator and possible contract for incubator services. Lori. How you doing, Lori?
Fine, thank you, Mayor.
Good.
Good evening, Mayor Schlum and Vice Mayor Dickey and members of the council. I'd like to just give you an overview of this item. On September 13th, at a council work study session, Mike Tyler presented information regarding establishing a Fountain Hills incubator, which would be considered a virtual incubator program. The incubator's goal is to create quality jobs in Fountain Hills. The incubator program, as was outlined by Mr. Tyler, is intended to provide startup and small businesses with support services and resources to nurture their growth and increase the likelihood of the business's success for the long term. The incubator would serve in Fountain Hills and the surrounding area. The incubator is organized and is its own business entity. However, the Arizona Business Advisors would operate and manage the incubator and the incubator programs. Arizona Business Advisors currently has secured commitments from 3 local businesses for additional support. 2 of those local businesses have agreed to fund the program at a rate of $250 a month, which is $3,000 a year. In addition, the 3rd local business is supporting the incubator with an in-kind donation of office space that can accommodate approximately 15 to 20 incubator members, which I would call incubator clients. In addition to their donation of space, they're also donating a lot of the office needs, the desks, the chairs, conference tables, and the like. In addition, the Fountain Hills Chamber of Commerce has also agreed to fund the business incubator at a rate of $375 per month. And at the work study in September, Arizona Business Advisors requested the town's financial support of the business incubator in the amount of $375 per month. The funding would, should the council consider this, the funding would begin in January, and of course our fiscal year runs through June 30th, so it would be a 6-month commitment, hence the funding request of $2,250. If the council decides to move forward with funding this, we would then work with Mr. Tyler to finalize an agreement that would include some goals and some deliverables. And I have given you the draft in regards to potential contract items. Mr. Tyler and I have been in communication regarding these. I do want to mention this is draft. I believe there might be some tweaks to this, but in general you will get the idea of what could potentially be in that contract. I'm happy to entertain any questions. Also, I'd like to make you aware that Mr. Tyler is in the audience should you have questions for him.
All right, good. Thanks, Lori. Yep, we talked about this, and now we've got quite a bit more on this outline. And this is something you put together, Lori, working with Mike on the draft?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, yes, I did. And quite frankly, these bullet points that you have and that's drafted potentially as bullet points in a contract should you decide to go in that direction. These came directly from the PowerPoint presentation that Mr. Tyler gave to the council in September.
Okay. Anyone from the public on this item?
Yes, Mayor. Phyllis Kern?
All right. Thanks, Lori. All right. Thanks, Phil. Any questions for Lori or Mr. Tyler? Councilmember Dickey, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things that come to your mind. First of all, the justification for public money. This obviously has to do with the public good, I would say. Is there a short way that you can justify public money in this project? And I have other things to say too, but I just wanted to ask that straight out.
Vice Mayor Dickey, Mayor Schlum, and members of the council. The goal for the incubator is certainly to nurture startup businesses and small businesses, and those could certainly include current businesses that are operating in Fountain Hills. And I believe that if we can help and nurture existing businesses as well as any startup businesses that could grow and expand in Fountain Hills, I think that would certainly be good use of our public money.
Mayor, thank you. I think that the criteria, from what I'm seeing here, the criteria and the assessments are pretty comprehensive. So that's, good on that side. I'm trying to, weigh the things here. Obviously, the amount of money isn't very much at this point, and we're not actually committing past June. Is that correct? Right now?
Vice Mayor Dickey, Mayor Schlum, and members of the council, that is correct.
Okay, then, thank you, Mayor. Then, and the 3 areas that were emphasized when Mike gave his presentation, I think we all appreciated those, the healthcare and that. So I think my only, I guess, cautionary note is that this becomes, again, when it's public money, I get concerned that everybody has access to it, so that there's no special interest or there's no narrowing of who can apply to be part of it, other than what you would use it to try to determine their ability to success or their commitment to what they're doing. So, I think that I could support this. I just wanted to ask those questions and get that out there. Thank you.
Councilmember Hanson.
Lori, at the September 13th work study, in the PowerPoint presentation, it said that there would be 5 members that would be signed up at a minimum before the incubator opens its doors in January. And the draft agreement says at a minimum of 2. So my question was, why did we reduce the number? And I was just wondering if any of these people have been signed up.
Councilmember Hanson, Mayor Schlum, if I might ask Mr. Tyler to come forward to answer some of those questions. We've certainly had the same discussion in our sponsors group. I do attend the incubator sponsors meeting, even though the town is not formally a sponsor. And I would certainly love to have Mr. Tyler explain some of the marketing that they've done, what they've come up with, and a little bit about their discussion about they'd like to have a minimum of 5 and now potentially 2. So if this is okay with the council, I would ask that Mr. Tyler come forward.
Thanks.
Thank you.
How are you, Mike?
Mayor, council members, good evening. Yeah, back in September, I did say that we would be looking to sign 5 up before we open the doors. Since we've been in the interim period, we've been doing our pre-marketing and discussing with other incubators, and what we found is that the way that they operate is to get up and running with 1, 2, maybe 3, so that you can start to build credibility and develop a good PR. What we have done so far in this period, we're still waiting for our space to be available in the incubator. It should be available next week. So at this point, we've not been able to actually sign anyone up because we have no space to offer them. But we are working with 3 companies that all look like they are excellent prospects. They all fall within the industry segments that the 3 segments that we talked about in September. We've also been building very strong relations with ASU, and I want to acknowledge the good offices of Nick DePorter in helping us in that regard. But we've built strong connections with SkySong. Turns out that the director of marketing for SkySong is a local Fountain Hills resident, so it's amazing who we have in Fountain Hills, and he has agreed to help us to market the program. We've also built strong relations with the W.P. Carey School of Business and the College of Technology and Engineering out at the Mesa campus. So I think those things are all going to enhance the credibility of the incubator. And once we get it open in January and get these first 2 or 3 clients in, then we can build on that.
Mike, thanks. Do you have another follow-up for that one? Yeah. Mike, if you would, now that we're on Channel 11 and for the public that may have read some of this and not participated perhaps in the work study. Can you give an overview of the incubator? Obviously, the town funding potentially is a very small part of it, but what are the goals? What's behind this virtual incubator, and how does it differ from others, and where do you hope it'll be in a year or two?
Sure. Yeah, the incubator is basically a public-private partnership between, as Laurie said, the town, the chamber, and 3 private companies. And basically we'll start off as, we call it a virtual incubator. Most incubators have residential space for companies, so that companies can come and live and operate within the incubator. Initially we'll have 1,500 square foot, so it will be collaborative space. Clients can come in and use the conference room, they can have workshops there, and they can network there, but they can't actually operate from the incubator. They can't hire employees, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll be starting off in that regard as a virtual incubator. The goal of the incubator is really to provide jobs in Fountain Hills. And we want to do a number of things with it. One of the goals is to make sure that the incubator is part of the fabric of Fountain Hills. So we really want to open it up to not only the incubator clients, but the population in general. So that the workshops that we hold, maybe on social media marketing, will be open to anyone who wants to come. And by that way, we've also had interest from a number of people in the community that want to volunteer at the incubator. So I think we can make it part of the fabric of the community. So that's kind of the second goal. These are all essentially short-term goals that we would see fulfilling within the next 1 to 2 years. We would hope to get up to between 5 and 10 clients through the incubator during that period. Then thereafter we have to decide, are we going to try and go for a full-blown residential incubator? If that's the case, then we need considerably more space. We would need something in the 20 to 30,000 square foot area. So it becomes a very much different proposition at that point. So I think the way that I described it back in the February work study was that we're using this as a pilot to test the water to some extent to see how much demand is there, how does it operate, can we be successful in graduating these incubator clients before we look to commit to the much larger project of building a residential incubator.
When you say residential, is that, just so people know what that means, doesn't mean people are living in there, doesn't mean that it's in the houses. Or...
No, it means that companies actually do business out of the incubator. They hire employees, they can invite customers in there. It's their place of work, essentially.
Good, thanks, Mike. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I'm like, and how are they benefiting? Are you like teaching classes, or kind of give us an idea of what maybe a day would be like when you first start?
Sure. We've kind of, there are different models of incubators. Some of the incubators, one of the largest in the valley is called Gangplank down in Chandler, and that's basically a networking type Gangplank incubator. People come in, they talk to each other, they share ideas. There is some structure around workshops. Our incubator is more based on the NACET incubator, which is up in Flagstaff. It's the Northern Arizona Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology. And what they do is more act as a virtual board of directors for clients. So every month they make sure that the client has a good business plan. Every month they'll sit with the clients and they'll go over their action plans. They'll set goals. They'll look at their finances and their cash flow. They really will manage it kind of like a CEO does. So that's the model that we'll be adopting. So in addition to that rigorous one-on-one oversight, there will be monthly workshops that they will be required to attend. So it's quite a rigorous, strenuous program as opposed to a more loose-knit networking approach.
Thank you.
Councilman Rauke.
Thank you, Mike. I think it's a great idea. certainly an opportunity for the town and the chamber to work together with the local business. And I know we didn't mention the local business that is sponsoring and donating the space. Is that kept on the down low for a reason, or can we, because I think it's important to recognize businesses that do donate and help contribute to the business and our community as a whole?
Absolutely. The business that's donating the space is Meridian Bank.
Okay.
And we will have, let's say, 1,500 square foot there. We'll have our own separate entrance. The business logo is already on the door. They're finishing the space right now, and we should be able to get in next week. The other two sponsors are the law firm of Sternfels and White and Craig Capercio CPA.
Mayor, just a few other questions from me. Is the goal, Mike, now I notice as far as the benchmarks and deliverables, one is to build additional sponsor support and involvement by engaging with at least three more sponsors by April 1st of 2012. Is the goal for this incubator to be self-sustaining, where it's not going to rely each year on funding from the town?
It probably cannot be self-sustaining in its current form. In order to be self-sustaining, it has to get to the residential incubator model. The purpose of additional sponsors is to recompense Arizona business advisors who right now are doing this at virtually no income.
What, for those businesses that do not sign up for a 12-month agreement as participants as an incubator, how are the other businesses in town going to be able to benefit from this, and what is it going to cost them to come in and perhaps have you look at their business plan, for example, or something along those lines?
It will depend, I think, on what their needs are. So we'll offer it, an initial free session to any business that wants to come in and consult with them. And then depending on what their needs are, there may or may not be a charge. If there is a charge, it will be very much a diluted, subsidized amount. But by and large, we'll offer free consulting for their first initial visit, and then depending on what they need, we'll come up with a solution that meets their needs.
Okay. Mayor, just one last question. I know Councilmember Brown has a question. I think this is probably more towards maybe Andrew or Julie. I certainly want to see before, I understand that the funds aren't going to be distributed by the town except after it's quarterly, as I understand it.
Right.
Certainly before we pay out any funds, I definitely want to see the final contract before any funds. I'm sure that's the staff's intent, but I just want to make that clear because I think it sets a bad precedent for approving funds before seeing the final contract, or at least having a good understanding of what it is.
Okay,
All right.
sure.
Thank you, Mike.
Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. Mike, I see this as a very positive thing for the town. We've heard numerous times how we've lost businesses, 6 and 7 over the past year. And if we could have just had one of the businesses attend your incubator and survive the horrible economy that we've been living through, I can see if we just have one business that survived it, I can see this as being a value added to the town, especially working with the chamber, as Councilmember Elke mentioned. So I see this as a positive for the town.
Good, thank you.
Mike, along those same lines, as far as the businesses you might have, I know we have broken down as far as what is the scheme, their sectors,
right,
NAICS codes. But is there an example, 2 or 3 companies that you would envision, or entrepreneurs you would envision coming and being a part of the incubator? What fields they might be in? Have you seen some recently come forward? What's a snapshot of some of these entrepreneurs that might come forward to be a part of this?
Yeah, I can tell you the 3 that we're currently discussing with. The first one is a guy who has invented a new medical device. He's a Fountain Hills resident, lives here in town. And if he's successful with his program, this could significantly change the way that injections are given. It's a safety syringe, so it could well. It has a lot of potential. So that's the first area. So that clearly falls in the medical and biotech segment that the town is focused on. The second area is a young man who has developed a protective coating that is used to coat leather and vinyl goods. And again, it's a significant improvement over the current technology, which is the Scotchgard type of technology, which is about 50-year-old, and nothing has changed in that technology in the last 50 years. So again, that's the type of project and product that has significant benefits. Both of those businesses would involve a certain amount of manufacture and warehousing that could be done right here in Fountain Hills. The third area is a gentleman who's working in the area of water and sewer pipes and is working on gaskets that prolong the life of those water and sewer pipes. So that's somewhat longer term.
Great.
But that's an example of three, and so they're very different examples, but all fall, I think, within the category of what we're looking for.
Great. Councilmember Leger.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mike, for your presentation and expounding on our staff notes here. I think Councilman Brown was hinting at retention. What type of data is out there that indicates a contrast between businesses that perhaps engage in an incubator versus those that do not? What can you help us with in that regard in terms of success as attributed to incubators?
I think the general failure rate on small businesses, it depends which data you look at, but in general it's recognized that the failure rate is somewhere between 55 and 70% in the first 5 years for general businesses. Mm-hmm. Businesses, however, that have gone through incubators, the success rate is somewhere above 85%. Mm-hmm. In terms of them lasting beyond that 5-year period.
And from your perspective, where's the contrast there? You mentioned a key component of the incubator is helping people to nurture, cultivate their business plan. Would that be a key variable?
That's certainly one of them, but one of the keys is focus and discipline, in that in small business owners generally are so immersed in their business, they really don't have time to stand back and say, is this the right thing that I should be doing? What else should I be doing? How do I change this? So having that virtual board of directors help them through that thinking is really the thing that makes the difference.
Thanks. Thank you, Mike.
All right.
Mayor? Oh, excuse me. If we're done questioning...
I've got one more just comment, probably more than question, but I think you've already introduced spoke with ASU, and obviously we spoke with NA, the folks from up in Flagstaff.
Yeah.
And the more incubator discussion I'm involved in, it seems like there's a lot of benefit by cross-pollinating with other incubators, quite a bit for the entrepreneurs themselves. So I hope you'll continue to do that once you get up and going.
Absolutely. I'm particularly excited about the opportunities with SkySong. I mean, I think that's been such a successful operation between the City of Scottsdale and ASU that I'm not sure we can get to that same level of degree, but I mean I think there are opportunities for us to work very closely with ASU, and they have been so open to doing that.
Very good, and hopefully Mayo Clinic as well.
Yes.
Over the hill. Any Councilmember Hanson?
Just real quick, going back to something Ginny brought out about using public funds and having everyone having equal access to the program. It's $3,000. For a year.
Yes.
For the person. What if somebody couldn't come up with the full amount? I mean, is there any way that they can, still participate in the program and maybe, be on a payment plan or something?
We are looking at the possibility of granting, and we have talked to a person in town who is a grant expert who has worked both at ASU and at TGen. So that person is going to help us as we get up and running with applying for grants that possibly we could use just for that sort of purpose. It's not in place right now, but we're hopeful that as we grow, we will be able to obtain grants.
Any other questions, comments?
Just a question for Lori if we're through.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thank you.
Lori, in our staff report, it indicates that the funding for this public-private partnership pilot is $2,250. We've already established that. It's coming from the economic development budget. How does this expenditure fit into economic development from your perspective and your vision for economic development?
Mayor Schlum, Councilmember Leger, and members of the council. Obviously, one of the goals in economic development is to create quality jobs in the town of Fountain Hills. And we have various budgeted line items in order to accomplish those goals. And so I have identified a couple of budgeted line items that I believe would fit within that goal. And that is particularly the advertising and marketing budget line items that we'll be pulling this out of, and also some of the professional services budget line item which we have budgeted. So we'll be pulling a portion out of each one of those, and I believe that that's what those funds are in there to expend for.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, any other comments on this item? Which we have a motion on, do we? Okay. Thanks, Lori. Councilmember Dickey.
Move to direct staff to prepare and execute a professional services agreement between the town of Fountain Hills and the Arizona Business Advisors in the amount of $2,250.
All right, any other discussion, council? All right, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye, opposed?
Mayor 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 11, consideration possible action of revision to strategic plan for 2010. We have our chair from the Strategic Planning Advisory Commission, Audra Kester-Thomas. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. As you know, in 2010, unanimously adopted the update Strategic Plan 2010, which was an update of the original town strategic plan. And as outlined in said plan, SPAC is charged on an annual basis to recommend revisions for your consideration. After a thorough review, I'm here on behalf of the Strategic Planning Advisory Commission to recommend 3 additions to the strategic plan. They fall under 2 of the strategic visions, civic responsibility and economic vitality. First, in civic responsibility, SPAC recommends adding the following strategic direction. Create a sense of urgency regarding the importance of residents and businesses taking responsibility to financially participate in the town's infrastructure maintenance and provision of basic services to protect home, land, and property values. SPAC recognizes that as our community continues to age and repair and replacement of original community infrastructure is quickly catching up to us, and as our community's amenities and infrastructure largely do contribute to property values, and as those decisions for investment or reinvestment arise, residents and business owners need information on how those investment decisions impact the community, not only just as a whole, but as well as the personal investment residents and business owners have made here in Fountain Hills. Under economic vitality, we're asking you to we're recommending 2 additional strategic directions. The first is to promote the maintenance of an aged balanced population that will support the long-term sustainability of our community. As you know, the recent census has told us that our community has become one of the oldest in Arizona. Future trends indicate that families will select smaller urban setting houses and will have little interest or funding in maintaining residences in far-reaching suburban neighborhoods. We need to be proactive in attracting the next generation of residents here in Fountain Hills to ensure that our community can thrive long into the future. And the second one we'd ask for your recommendation to approve is to define Fountain Hills' market niche and actively pursue opportunities that attract and retain high-quality employment opportunities. SPAC has been excited about the recent updates from the town's Economic Development Administrator and are anxious to see the forthcoming Economic Development Plan. And as part of this ongoing effort, it's critical that we identify what makes Fountain Hills unique and, more importantly, competitive, so that our limited resources can be most effectively applied to economic development opportunities that are fostered and cultivated for the long-term benefit of our community. Commitment to high-quality employment-generating opportunities for our community, amongst many other things, will significantly contribute to our long-term financial sustainability. SPAC asks that you approve these 3 additions to the town's strategic plan, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them at this point.
Thank you, Audra, and thanks to the Commission for keeping our strategic plan alive and for having us consider these updates. Do we have anyone from the public on this item?
Linda Bardo.
All right. Thanks.
Greetings again, Mayor and Council. I just had a quick question. How, for item number 2, does the Strategic Planning Commission specifically go after the younger population? What's the plan to go ahead and draw some of the younger population, as she stated, into the community? And in terms of number 1, that's really what I was speaking about before with the fire department and some of my ideas to generate revenue. I know we do a lot of fundraisers, but I'm looking forward to really taking this on myself in partnership with the chairwoman, as well as some of our local organizations and businesses, on ways that we can come up with that will both bolster the fire department, promote the town, maybe bring in some new levels of income, possibly even some new businesses, as well as getting national attention, hopefully, definitely local and state, on the town in a positive way, to band together to go ahead and create this possibility of having that taken care of by the citizens, as opposed to just from the, is it the capital investment fund that it comes out of for the fire department? But whatever, whichever government fund it's going to come out of, I'd like to see us either be able to do it all ourselves, or at least most of it come from the citizens. So thank you. And just that one question for the chairwoman.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
No, sir.
All right. Thanks, Audra. Do you want to speak to that item?
I'd be happy to. As you know, the strategic plan is a framework, and of that framework, there are strategic directions. We took advice from you when we crafted the new strategic plan update. It serves as a long-term vision. You look to a strategic plan to ensure the long-term vision of the community is fulfilled, and that may take years, many years, decades actually, to fulfill that vision. And so the strategic directions, which is really the important operating component of the strategic plan, 3 that we're actually asking for addition to the strategic plan tonight, serve as the framework for your consideration for every single item that you consider on an annual budget basis, and those that come before you even tonight. And so in theory, any of the items that came before you tonight should fit somewhere into forwarding the strategic plan, and in particular at least 1 or 2 of the strategic directions. In particular, to the second strategic direction, promote the maintenance of an age-balanced population that will support the long-term sustainability of our community. It's not necessarily SPAC's job to recommend specific ways to do that, though SPAC does have several that they'd like to offer. It's more of a community action item as well. And there's some specific ways where we can do that, and in part we've already heard about some of those strategies that might help that. In particular, I think SPAC has often talked about the importance of creating quality employment opportunities in this town, where we're attracting the next level of professional. So those young professionals come to this community and grow their families here for the long term, as opposed to spending some of their retirement years here. And so if we can create some quality employment opportunities in this community that don't require folks to have to drive 45 minutes or an hour into work, we're going to find success in retaining those folks long term, because trends show and indicate that my generation will likely not want a suburban lifestyle because they're too far away from home. And as the former Governor Janet Napolitano always talked about, the time tax, it's too much time to sit in a car commuting from one location to another when you're spending 1, 2, or 3 hours doing that away from your family. Folks don't want to do that anymore. We have too many busy lives. And so one of the things that we really recommend is trying to really bolster our economic development opportunities that really specifically target long-term and quality, high-quality employment opportunities here. So that would be one example, something that we could do to implement that. No problem.
Thanks, Audra. Some of these seem like to be subsets of some of the things that we already have, or maybe you felt SPAC has thought over this last year that it's a bit too broad, like the last item folks are suggesting, with define Fountain Hills market niche and actively pursue opportunities. Currently, we have EV4, promote retention, expansion, relocation of quality businesses. Seems just to go like another step to identify a niche and maybe a type of job, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it's a specific framework. I think it's important that we're retaining and expanding and looking for relocation opportunities, but we're recommending also taking the work that Ms. Gary has already done, moving that a step forward, and in fact, making sure that the strategic plan complements the work that you as a town council have already committed to in economic development, to ensure that's reflective here, to ensure we're identifying what that market niche is, identifying and then fulfilling in the long term commitments that will complement our strengths our competitive advantages, because I think we have several, and not just deciding each year something new to do in economic development. SPAC felt strongly that this was a distinct strategic direction, not necessarily one that could be articulated in perhaps EV4 as you recommend.
With these three items, obviously you guys did an amazing job on putting together 2010 plan, and you have reached out to a gazillion different people in Fountain Hills and went to where they were in order to pull them into the whole process. These three items, how were they developed or derived?
These items were over a course of 3 Strategic Planning Advisory Commission meetings. We took an intensive look ultimately at the strategic plan and used research that we had been conducting over the course of the last year and been presenting actually to you of the most recent, and looking at demographic trends as well as some localized trends to ensure that the vision that we have set forth that was derived by the input of our residents, that the strategic directions outlined are going to fulfill that. And these are 3 that our commission, over a course of 3 meetings, determined were perhaps holes in the current strategic plan that will help us get us to that vision, maybe in a quicker fashion.
How do you think that aligns with what you guys have done thus far? Are you comfortable with meeting as a commission and evaluating additional things to add to the town council goals through the strategic plan for us to follow outside of specific public input and surveys and other things that you guys have utilized in the past?
As you know, we recommend, and the plan outlines, that a full update of the strategic plan occur every 5 years, and we feel very strongly that a commitment to a public involvement approach is always important, not only for that effort, but then also in really important efforts or specific initiatives that may be diverting from the publicly adopted vision. In this case, we find SPAC one of our jobs, based on who we are, our makeup, and our background, is on the annual basis to evaluate internally what those recommendations should be, if any, or changes to the strategic plan. And so we are providing our professional expertise to you on what we think those recommended changes should be based on, again, the research we have done.
Were there any items that you folks considered taking off?
Removing from the strategic plan? There was some discussion, though we haven't found anything that we found of merit. We feel strongly and very comfortable with the strategic directions that were outlined as part of the original 2010 plan. Granted, it's only about 1.5 years old, so we're still pleased. It's still somewhat fresh in our minds. So we didn't have any recommendations for any removal or editing of language in the existing plan, simply the addition of these 3.
Good. I don't want to hog all the time, but Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Audra, with the number 1 about the sense of urgency, was that a response to the bond failure? And even if it wasn't, what do you have any recommendations, or we're kind of floundering on the best way to go forward on these kind of items, and the recent rain sort of punctuated that with the roads. So do you, just like you had ideas about the niche, do you have ideas about a better way to communicate with folks so that the urgency isn't just like, oh, they care but we don't, so that we're all kind of in it together?
The first question's easier. The first question was the create a sense of urgency regarding the importance of residents and businesses taking responsibility to financially participate in the town's infrastructure maintenance and provision of basic services to protect home, property, and land values. Was that in response to the bond failure? And in fact, it was not. That was offered actually 2 months in advance. Again, this is a 3-month process that we took in our meetings to each month negotiate and discuss and, frankly, wordsmith these alternatives. That was offered actually 2 months in advance of the bond initiative without any projection of if it would pass or fail, just the importance to communicate. In fact, it was more on the terms, the fact that our community is reaching that 30-year-old mark, and frankly, truly, some of the basic infrastructure is coming up and needs to be replaced or maintenanced in some respect. And it'll be sometimes the first time the community contributes to to the infrastructure cost as opposed to just buying their first property here. And many of us work with communities who are going through the same kind of transition, master planned communities who are about 30 years old, and they're facing these same sorts of things. So actually it came really out of just the timing of our community and knowing that those choices are ahead of both business owners and property owners. As far as ideas, thank you for making me queen of the day. I'll be happy to offer some ideas. But in general, I think what SPAC would like, would always recommend is a principal value that's identified as a strategic direction already in the strategic plan, as well as how we conduct business overall. That's including the public and the community dialogue. I think it's really important for big decisions like these, and especially some of the feedback maybe you have received since the bond's failing, is that clearly we need to get out and start to listen, understand where the community is comfortable at, and inform folks on what the consequences of certain decisions are and the timing effects of those. And so we would encourage, at least on a personal level, maybe I won't speak for SPAC since they didn't send me with a particular dialogue to offer, but on a personal level, I would recommend, really initiating a community dialogue where folks are invited to sit down and talk about really what faces our future in terms of community infrastructure, but also beyond that, and help craft a solution from the bottom up. I think that might be maybe a better way of going forth in the next initiative, if there's a bond initiative or another funding mechanism that's selected by council. That certainly will help inform you a little bit better on the decisions you're making, especially related to that kind of an idea or that kind of a topic.
And Audra, and part of my experience with SPAC and long ago when we were doing town halls is that the people that do come, and even if it's hundreds of people, and even after surveys and that kind of thing, which can be thousands of people, they do tend to agree. Then they would say, yes, we want, fill in the blank, property tax or something like that. But then the implementation of it is always where we struggle. So as we move forward, I look forward then, to say forward twice in the same sentence, to your and SPACs and anybody in the community's assistance with these kind of items, because I think, again, it was always revealing to me at all the town halls, even before we had a community center, before we had anything, everybody wanted these things, and the more knowledge everybody had, the more united they were in that desire and that they felt they could do it. But then at some point there's a stumbling block in getting over the finish line. So we would love to work with you on that.
Yeah, our experience on a professional level is that when those impacted by the decisions are included in the solution, not only are they more vested in that outcome, they're more willing to help bolster the political capital in order and the long-term commitment to ensuring that that decision, whatever it is fulfilled.
Councilmember Alke.
Chair, I just want to say thank you to you and your commission members. Phenomenal work, and I think it's important to recognize that the time that you're spending up here today, and obviously and all the time that you're spending the commission meetings, is free of charge and is donated to the town. So very impressed with your presentation tonight, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Great, thank you. Any other comments on this? We have obviously had some dialogue, and there are a lot more still questions out there as to how to actually affect some of these things that are brought up. So I wasn't sure if tonight's the best format in a council meeting to move forward on these types of things, more of a idea where we could get into the actions that might be taken in order to move on these before we adopt them, to see if they're practical, possible, and that type of thing. But we've had some good dialogue today, but I was thinking perhaps more of a work study, or perhaps as part of our goal-setting retreat as well. But I know we'll be talking a lot more about, as we do always, the strategic plan.
And if I may, just
Sure.
to react to that, and that's in fact in your annual work studies, you'll recall in the strategic plan, the process, these strategic directions are the framework to implement the vision. The actual tasks in order to forward those are things that you guys work on. Not only do you identify those in your annual goal-setting retreat, and perhaps even offer some specific implementation strategies, which you did last year, but then staff also comes back to you and gives you ideas to react to, yeah, that's another way we can forward that particular strategic direction that we find as a priority. And so that's where the rubber meets the road on an annual basis, because that sets, of course, forth your direction for the budget planning session. In advance of that, SPAC will be delivering in January actually recommendations for what we think your priorities, recommendations on things we would like you to consider as priorities for the fiscal year 12-13 budget. Some of those strategic direction priorities that we identify will actually specify some of the ideas, specific ideas that we'd like you to consider, and that will help you to inform your January retreat, which I know has been pushed back based on your November activities. But that is part of the annual process, and we're, as always, happy to be part of that and be as meaningful as we possibly can to help you guys make your decisions.
All right, thanks, Audra. Maybe a question for Julie on infusing updates to the strategic plan, timing, these specific items. Does staff have comments, feedback for us outside of the staff summary, which is pretty brief?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As Chair Kester Thomas said, I think a good opportunity to talk about these would be at their goal-setting retreat, and we'll make sure that they're included, work with SPAC on and getting that in the information and have that dialogue at that time. And that retreat is scheduled for January 26th.
And Audra, the item tonight's up for consideration and possible adoption. Are you suggesting that we adopt these tonight based on our discussion, then delve into them at the annual?
If you'd like. No, the actual action is for you to adopt the 3 additions to the strategic plan. SPAC maintenance is it. So actually there will be no staff time involved in actually updating the strategic plan. We do that all for free. And we'll be sending that along. But the intent is, of course, to add these 3 strategic directions to your strategic plan, which may or may not help inform you if they are priorities for your upcoming budget year. And if you have particular implementation strategies you'd like to evoke, you're more than happy to do so at that time. But again, this is the framework, and we're recommending a framework change, in this case 3 additions at this time.
I think what I'm getting a little caught up on is and obviously Audrey, you know how much I value you and the entire group. I think there needs to be a little less formal dialogue between perhaps you or maybe some of your peers on the commission and also the council members. I think it would be of great value for us to have a greater, less formal dialogue with the commissioners to understand these items and to hold us or keep us familiar with the other items more regularly. I don't know if there's a structure to do that or just an invitation between parties to get together over coffee and talk about some of these things more often, because it just feels like we go a good period of time and we'll get a letter from SPAC or a memo, or we'll get a joint meeting. And I just feel like it's a bit formal. I don't know if you have any suggestions along those lines, or if you would just encourage us to invite, get together with the commission members on occasion to talk about items.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we certainly love to chat. We're very mindful of open meetings laws, and we feel that this is a formal action that needs to be taken by council, and henceforth we're coming in a formal setting to ask for your formal your formal adoption of our recommendation. We feel in this case this is the appropriate setting to do so. Actually, frankly, the only setting to do so. But in terms of always, continuing collaboration in an informal setting, great. But I also encourage and note that we champion contributions and feedback from the public, and the sunshine laws we take very seriously and always want to be able to keep our doors open as much as possible so that we can have a collaborative process as well. So in this case, we feel like this is the appropriate setting because we're actually asking for a formal adoption or change to a document. But outside of that context, I think SPAC is always open and willing to hear from you and anyone else. We've been honestly open as much as possible. We actually encourage folks to communicate with us, not only for the strategic plan's sake, but personally. We have, I think, our phone numbers and email addresses on the website as well. And so we want to encourage that continued open collaboration. And so whatever works for you, great. But in this case, we feel really important that this is a formal adoption process and it needs to occur in a formal meeting setting.
No, and I wasn't, absolutely. I was thinking more of the more casual dialogue related to the values that you guys have as individual commissioners with the council members, not formal action being taken in a casual area. I think it's just the dialogue. You guys have a great deal to add and are engaged in this specific one area of the strategic plan, which I think each council member can benefit from. So like I had alluded to, I think it just takes picking up the phone and and inviting each other to coffee to talk about different things and to make sure we're all engaged in the SPAC and what's going on and where you guys are, what you're thinking is next or potentially ideas as to how to reach our goals.
Great.
But, yeah, good. I agree with when we're looking to take action, we're not going to be doing that outside of a council meeting where we have a quorum and we have a public meeting. Councilmember Rauke?
At this time, I'd move to approve proposed revisions to Strategic Plan 2010 as recommended by the Strategic Planning Advisory Commission.
Thank you. Councilmember Rauke, do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Any other dialogue on this item? Councilmember, Vice Mayor Dickey.
Thank you. I appreciate what you were saying, Mayor. I know that I think we like to always know when what would have been like to build up to this kind of. It almost seems like what you're saying is what could have come before.
Yeah.
But given what they are, the three values are very, to me, they're not controversial. They're very positive, and the benefit, maybe in my opinion, to doing this now is that then it will be incorporated into the documents that we'll be looking at on the 26th, and I think, and then whatever backup information and other research that SPAC may do would be included on the 26th. So I would be fine with taking them because I don't have any objections to any of the three of them. The worst, in my opinion, that would happen is that we just can't get something done, and that's obviously true about a lot of these things in the next year. So I see no problem with putting that in now, and then it gives us a nice full picture when we talk on the 26th.
I'm sorry.
Councilmember Leger.
I'd like to amend the motion to adopt these at a future council meeting. We talk process here. I mean, all of a sudden these appear on the agenda and they're before us. The language is extremely academic, vague. It's 30,000 feet. I think that I appreciate the work. I appreciate the comments. I think the appropriate starting place for this revision to a strategic plan is at a work study and or at a retreat. In that we have a retreat coming up, I would think that would be the appropriate place to flesh these out. And as Audra, as you've mentioned, we're talking about strategic values and we have strategic directions here. It's very difficult for me to imagine council goals attributed to these strategic directions because they are so academic and they are so vague. I don't see the process being slowed down by simply fleshing these out at our retreat and having an opportunity to define specifically what you're asking for here. For example, create a sense of urgency regarding the importance of residents and businesses taking responsibility. That is extremely vague, and I have a hard time adopting that without really fleshing that out and looking at specific examples of goals that could be set. And there's another way I look at that as well, is that it's somewhat redundant with respect to goals that we already have in the plan. So once again, I am an advocate of the strategic plan. I was involved in the strategic plan before we had a strategic plan. These are ideas, I think, that need to be further discussed and then brought back to us for adoption. For example, promote the maintenance of an age-balanced population. I mean, that is something out of a strategic planning textbook that has no meaning for me. We need to talk more about these things. And I, as the mayor, understand open meeting laws as well as the next person, and we're not simply suggesting that we have informal discussions, but I followed this process for a number of years, and typically this type of information doesn't appear on a council agenda until we've gone through and vetted the process. And I have the same question that was asked earlier, is that I need to have more public input into this, and I know you've extracted that from the previous plan, create a sense of urgency. I mean, I think there's a sense of urgency out there amongst citizens. They also have a sense of urgency that they didn't want to, spend tax right now or have their tax dollars increased. So I'm not sure it's about urgency. I think it's a bigger conversation, and the underlying assumption here may certainly be that council is not urgent in these matters, and I don't think there's anything further from the truth. So I really think that this should go back to the work study will be on the same schedule, to the retreat will be on the same schedule. If they're clarified and we backfill and we can be more concrete in terms of what these are, we can certainly bring them back to the next meeting for formal approval. So my amendment is that we, the simplest thing to do would basically to try just to table the discussion until we have an opportunity in our retreat, which is, by the way, a public meeting, to flesh these out. I would certainly feel more comfortable with that. Thank you.
Second.
All right, motion to table. Got a second? And we just, no discussion on that, correct? Or is there discussion on that?
Discussion only as to tabling, not
All
as
right.
to the merits.
Thank you. Any discussion on the tabling? That's Councilmember Dickey, Vice Mayor. Hello.
I'll go along with that just so everybody's comfortable.
Okay. Any other discussion related to the table? All right. All in favor of tabling this till the goal meeting of January 22nd, 7th, 6th? Indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Mayor, 6-0.
All right, good. So are we done with discussions on the item as a whole? All right. And on to the next item is 12, consideration of ordinance 11-11 regarding modifications to Chapter 7 of the Town Council and Transitional Development Impact Fee schedules required to be adopted in compliance with changes to state law in SB 1525. Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As you know, this last legislative session, a sweeping piece of legislation with respect to development fees was adopted. It's Senate Bill 1525. And rather than tell you what has changed, let's just presume everything's changed. Only 18 lines of the statute survived, so this is a new piece of legislation completely. Primarily, 1525 did a couple of major things. It established a framework for adoption that is procedurally a lot more robust, I think is the best way to put it, than the prior procedure. It encompasses what we had adopted as part of the state statutes a few years ago. The infrastructure improvements plan now takes a more of a center stage and becomes the fundamental document by which everything else is adopted. So it's not necessarily completely different than it was with respect to what we're calling things, but they are treated very differently. And now it's assumed that you have one plan, one capital and financing plan that covers everything. The other major thing that the statute did is it, for the first time, defined necessary public service. Under the existing law today, and as it has been prior, the town was allowed to collect development fees for necessary public services. That has always been a determination by the elected bodies of those communities. It's never been a determination at the state level. I can tell you this has been a source of contention on the battlefront over this type of legislation for the past 6-7 years. It has constantly been one of the things that the Home Builders Association has sought, and in this bill has succeeded in getting. What that definition does is narrows to a list of things that are permissible under the statute. Most of them are hardscape items: water, sewer, streets, drainage. And in particular, interest there, drainage is actually new to most communities. Most communities don't have a development fee for drainage. Fountain Hills obviously is a community that could benefit from that. So I think in that respect there'll be an opportunity for the town to explore something it didn't do before. Other services that are permitted are fire and police services as well, with some limitations to not allowing administrative vehicles or other things to be included in the cost of the fees. Parks and recreation is an area that's still allowed, but with a very long laundry list of things that aren't okay. And I won't even try to recite all of them without having the statute in front of me because it is an exhaustive list. Essentially, though, the provision started off saying parks were not allowed if they were over 30 acres. We worked with the home builders on that provision to ensure that parks over 30 acres that had a direct benefit, and we introduced the concept to them of direct benefit so that big pieces of infrastructure that had a reach further than their immediate neighborhood might still be included. Fountain Hills is a perfect example of this. We have recreational facilities that pretty much the whole town uses. This is not a community that has parks that are in different areas that only the people in those areas use. Pretty much all the infrastructure and all the resources are used by, or can be used by, all the residents. One of the fees that has been eliminated that is currently charged in other communities, cultural facilities, the Mesa fee that was bandied about a bit, it really hadn't actually been collected for facilities already built. It was for new ones. That's gone. I'm sure you'll be very disappointed to know that you can't have a helicopter. That's out. Airplanes as well, so the town won't be able to ever put that into its fleet. You also are not allowed to have libraries over 10,000 square feet, and those also have to have a direct benefit. So again, in Fountain Hills, the direct benefit test is fairly simple. The library benefits everybody in town because you have one, but your library is bigger than 10,000 square feet, so we're going to have to make an adjustment for that. One of the arguments that has been, I guess, alive since the beginning of this discussion, this session, is whether or not these provisions apply to act as a complete ban to the things that fall outside of the range, or if it means that only that first portion of it is then fundable. For instance, a park over 30 acres, if you have a 50-acre park, is it completely off the list, or is it a park for which you can charge 30 acres as development fee and 20 acres not? There's still some debate about that, but our interpretation has been, and the model ordinance developed over the past few months has included in it language that says the first 30 and the first 10,000 square feet. The reason for that is we think that it is nonsensical for bigger communities, and understand that when we developed the model ordinance over those 4 or 5 painful months following the session, we were including a lot of other cities in it, and it didn't make any sense at all for a municipality not to be able to choose to build a 25,000 square foot library, only charge development fees for 10,000 feet, rather than building 3 small ones and having to have triple the O&M cost to operate the libraries. It just didn't make any sense, so we feel very strongly about that provision. So what has happened now is you're required to do 2 things under the statute. The first one is adjustments that need to be made as of the 1st of next year. So January 1 of 2012, you need to make an adjustment to certain development fees, things that are falling into what in Fountain Hills is 4 categories. In some communities it's a bit more than that. First category is unchanged. These are fees that are currently collected in a manner that is allowed under the new statute as necessary public service and can continue unchanged until the point in time that you adopt your 2014 study, and we'll come to that in a moment. The second one is a modified fee, and these are fees that have pieces of them that would no longer be allowed under the new statute, but components of them that also are allowed. For instance, Parks and Rec or your library fee are the 2 that fit into that category. So you'll be able to continue to collect them just at a lower rate. Reduced grandfathered fees is the way I've referred to them in here, because you don't have any grandfathered fees that aren't reduced. What this fee is applicable to is those pieces of infrastructure that were financed and for which debt service payments had a pledge of development fees included, and those were done prior to June 1 of 2011. Those are allowed to be carried through even if they're an impermissible fee category until you repay the debt service. So for instance, your general government fee is going to carry forward to repay the debt service that's still in there, and I believe it's only the community center that's still in that fee, until it's repaid, and then it will be no longer able to be repaid. This also doesn't touch fees already collected. So for instance, your open space fee category has been eliminated. You have a balance in there. That can be spent on things for which the statute allowed you to spend it on prior to the change. Your open space fee category is also a little bit unique because it also contains recreational facilities that are actually more park-like. We have a bit of a running gun battle going between an interpretation between the Legislative Council saying that something like Fountain Hills Open Space and Trailhead System was a park that fit the requirements, and a letter from the Home Builders Association of Phoenix taking the direct opposite approach to that. In response to the means of the Home Builders Association, Phoenix eliminated its open space fee just out of mere convenience to them to not have to go to war over it. I think Fountain Hills is in a little different boat, but your open space fee as of the beginning of next year will be gone. The balance will stay, and until you get to your 2014 study, we won't be able to collect on those things that were in there that were more like Parks and Recs facilities. It just seemed counterintuitive that if you had an open space fee before, even if it was something that was more Parks and Recs like, that we couldn't just shift it over to the Parks and Recs fee temporarily. We're going to have to go through the process required in the statute to get there. After this adjustment in fees, and that's what tonight's ordinance does, it makes the modifications to make you step down that first step. Afterwards, we then have a second timeline that begins ticking there. That requires you, prior to the beginning of August 2014, to have readopted your fee program in accordance with the new statute. If you do not readopt in accordance with the new statute, as of August 1, 2014, you cannot collect. So there's a rush now for the next 2 years of everybody getting their fee studies done. And so we have fee consultants like Pat lining up city after city and running around like crazy people for the next 3 years. And Pat probably won't be even upright anymore by the time she gets to the end of that. She'll just be wheeled in, and we'll have to talk to her from a hospital bed probably. But it's been a mad rush to the end of this year, and this is the small part. This is the easy interim fee. The full-blown studies are much more cumbersome and much more process-oriented, and it's going to take a while. So what we're going to be back to you with in the beginning of next year is adoption of the model ordinance. After we finished the process, we identified that the one thing that was killing us in discussions about development fees consistently was the fact that there was inconsistency amongst the cities and towns. One of the ordinances that was always held up as a good ordinance in terms of the way fees were calculated was Phoenix. So we started with Phoenix's ordinance, and we created a model for the league to offer out to all cities and towns. Now, I'm not crazy. I don't believe that everybody's going to adopt it just as it is, but I'm really hopeful that most communities will adopt the model or a very, very close facsimile of what the model is, so that we can stay on the same page procedurally and not end up with outlier municipalities causing the Home Builders Association to get excited again. If everybody stays the course, we have a 3-year window that the governor has given us in her authorization letter to roll this thing out and implement it. And I think it would be impractical for anybody to try and change the statute this year or next year anyway, because we're all in the middle of trying to redo our fee ordinances. So the model ordinance in a Fountain Hills form will come back to you sometime probably in the spring. And the model ordinance is done. I just need to go back and now try and get past the aversion I have to looking at the thing, and then creating a model, a customized Fountain Hills version, and then go out and do that for the other cities as well. After that's adopted, probably at the same time, you're going to need to put into your budget for next year the funds necessary to hire a fee consultant, because under the new statutory requirements, only qualified professionals are allowed to prepare your IIP. Well, qualified professional means a firm that's able to have the engineering and financial expertise to be able to analyze your capital plans and create the financial models necessary to create your fee structure. So firms like Heinfield and Meach are going to be the ones that are out there. And I can tell you from experience, there are probably about 5 that are out there in the Arizona market available to you. So unfortunately, the bigger cities have lined them up already, and hopefully we'll be able to get in the queue to get it done on time. But that will be the next step. We'll adopt the ordinance. We'll present to you a budget item for the funding to be able to do this, and then hire that consultant, perform all the tasks necessary, get the fees adopted and implemented prior to August of 2014. Be happy to answer any questions you have.
Sounds like all the development fees we've taken in over the last couple of years that have been frozen, the levels from prior years stink because of the state legislature, but the fees that we've collected will largely go into attorney's fees and to consulting fees to get us established so we can be in compliance with the new state legislature's laws.
Well, Mr. Mayor, and you know, it's, in fairness, you are allowed to include those costs in your development fee study.
Okay.
So you're able to take your fee study cost, your development costs, put those into the fees, but realistically, you're not going to collect enough development fees over the near future to repay that. So you're going to get repaid for them, but it'll be off into the future. It's not going to be on the front end. You're going to have to front the money and be repaid. So it's nice that you're allowed to put them in there, but it really doesn't mean much to next year's budget.
So the development fees that are there for growth to pay for itself, you know, in large extent at least. Obviously not long term, but at least on the front end. Do we have an idea that this won't be changed again in a number of years, or, I mean, when does that part start to slow down? Or because it has, obviously we had the moratorium, and then now we have these significant changes. Is this it for a while, do you think?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the letter from the governor authorizing or approving of this bill and moving on into law specifically said she didn't want to see it in the rest of her term. So I think that there's a fair assumption that we're not going to see development fee legislation of any significant kind coming forward in the next few years. Everyone is required to adopt this by 14, so I think there's a very strong policy argument to be made that tinkering with the statute before 14 is just not reasonable, because there's time, money, and energy that needs to be expended to get this done. So I don't think we're going to see anything in the near term, and we will vigorously oppose anything that happens. But I can also tell you that this is the 7th year I've been involved in dealing with this topic at the legislature. It seems to be the thing that will never die. And the statute was created from 4 other state statutes, literally cobbled together paragraph by paragraph, sometimes in the original text, leaving the statutory references from the old statute it came from. So it's going to need tinkering at some point, but I am very reluctant to encourage anybody from the municipality side to try and tinker now. I think there needs to be a period of time in which it's just left alone so that we can analyze it and find out what problems we have with it. You know, in a good piece of legislation, a dozen things can be unknown. A dozen things can pop up as unintended consequences. And something as cobbled together as this, it could be hundreds. And we need some time to work on that.
That makes sense. So the development fees being addressed here will, it sounds like ultimately will reduce our revenue coming into the town for largely infrastructure projects. Is that right?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, it's definitely going to reduce. It's about an 8% reduction for the interim fees, and we don't know what it'll be going on into the next, into the 2014 version. It could go up. I mean, you just never know until you do the study.
And this didn't help the state budget, did it?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is a completely local issue. And until this legislation, the determination of what was a necessary public service was a completely local issue.
Okay. Any Councilmember Leger?
Thank you, Mayor. Either Andrew or Julie, when will we, on our development fee study schedule, when will we do our next study?
We updated 2 years ago in 2008, adopted in 2009. We did an 2008 study, it was adopted in 2009, so I wouldn't imagine we would have been back for another couple of years. You know, we were typically on a 5 to 10 year cycle depending upon the city, and here I think we did, at the most it was 5 years before it was up.
I think it was 10 years, then we decided to do 1 in 5.
And frankly, we had a couple of years ago lobbied hard for and achieved a provision that allowed for indexing so that the fees would follow in the inflationary growth and not have to be updated so frequently, but that was yanked out in this one.
Andrew or Julie, so this is going to call for a full study. Is that correct? Okay. And what is that going to cost us?
I'm going to look to Julie and Pat on that because I don't know.
Mayor, members of the council, we will have to get a quotation from the consultant. We did budget money in this current fiscal year for the study, and we will likely have to budget for it again next year because the study, it takes at least almost a year to be done.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know at this time what the cost of that study is going to be.
Range?
About $2,000, right?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, in other communities, depending upon their size, the studies have ranged anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000. And they're not small potatoes kind of fees. Fountain Hills is a little bit unique because we're not only a smaller community, but we're a smaller community with a very few development fees charged. I won't speak for Pat in this one, but we haven't been unhappy with the reasonableness of the fees, so whatever comes back to us will likely be very competitive, but they're all over the board.
So basically, this legislation, once again, an unfunded mandate of sorts from the state is going to cost us $50,000 plus to do a study that we weren't normally scheduled to do. Is that?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Leger, that's correct. And Fountain Hills, like other communities, did an update to adjust and include those items required by the changes 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So many communities went out and did a full new study, spent $50,000 to $100,000, and now are doing another one 3 years later.
I recall that. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Alke?
Andrew, you mentioned a few minutes ago, as far as the town of Fountain Hills getting in the queue to retain these consultants. And maybe this is more geared towards Julie, what's the process going to be as far as selecting that consultant and getting the best price that we can? I understand that there's going to be a big need, all the cities and towns having to do this, but what's the process going to be there so we're not paying more than what we need to?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as you know, one of the carve-outs in terms of the selection of professional services is that you can do it by direct selection. So we can certainly do a request for qualifications, just have people submit for that. We can do a number of different things. We probably wouldn't do a request for proposals for fees because it really isn't a cost-based thing. It's more of a quality-based thing. I can tell you there really are only about 5 or fewer these days out there that can do it. So it's not a large universe of people. We can even just call them and ask them to submit, tell us what range they would be in for a fee study for us.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. So basically, we're talking several insults to injury, I think. Not only the injury of finances, because we have to pay for this. Several years ago, we had the foresight to say, let's do what we need to do that was mandated upon us so that at least we can do incremental changes and that we don't have to keep doing these studies. No disrespect. But so we had the foresight to do that cut that out. So now what we spent then, it's not wasted, but basically it's soon to be obsolete. Now we have to pay extra to get a mandated study in a market that's obviously going to be highly competitive and pay it back with fees that are going to be diminished because of the law that was changed. So, and not to mention that we have less in the coffers because there's been a moratorium. So anybody who is a current resident of this city and has been a current resident of this town for all these years has been supplementing whatever new development is coming in, and all city and municipality residents who are current residents who have lived a place for a long time are supplementing future people in order to keep up with the infrastructure. And every year, like you said, for 7 years, there's been an erosion or an attempt to erode development paying for itself. So we talk about urgency, we talk about what we can do to keep our house in order, and we do that. How do we communicate urgency? How do we take some of the other things that are on our strategic plan, which have to do with civic involvement? Well, we talk to our legislators. Now, if we look at the Department of Water Resources fees, that was $29,000, $30,000, $30,000, this possibly $100,000. We have a legislature, we have legislative representatives, we have Mr. Kavanaugh, Mrs. Reagan, and Ms. Ugenti are our representatives who all vote and even sponsor these things. So what's our urgency? Get our people involved, get knowledge out there. What's our civic involvement? Vote, pay attention. If these folks thought that they were hurting their cities, maybe they wouldn't do that. But obviously, a $200,000 or $150,000 hit when we're sitting here and taking these steps that we take year after year to try to keep ourselves in order, and then we get these things imposed upon us. So, you know, I guess we have to vote for this. I guess we have to vote yes. But that doesn't mean that we have to think it's right.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, two things to note. The statute does require you to update your fees, studies, your IIPs at least every 5 years. So, and there's a process for submitting to an advisory committee, or I guess if you don't have an advisory committee, a process for publicizing if you think those studies don't need to be updated. So for a community that's leveling off, you may be able to avail yourself of that, but the requirement is for every 5 years. The other thing to note about tonight's action in particular, and this is important because we have one council member missing, because these fees have to be implemented on the 1st of January, we have an emergency clause in here. So we do require 6 votes in order to make the emergency clause happen. If you pass it without the emergency clause, there'll be a gap in time there. It'll still be passed. It'll just mean that the 15th of January is when it is implemented.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe we should just send the state a bill. The governor sends the feds a bill for the border.
Everybody's sending a bill.
Yeah.
Councilmember Elke.
Andrew, is there any benefit, I understand we have to have this implemented by 2014, is there any benefit to delaying that to allow for a little bit of time, much like when we talked about the water issue and waiting and seeing if there was going to be some changes to the legislation or some changes? Is there any benefit, since we did one at the study in 2009, and we're supposed to do one every 5 years or so, to waiting to do the study in 2013-14, or 2013 as opposed to this coming year, just to give a little bit of time, and perhaps there would be more accounting firms available to do it at that time as well?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Elke, the only benefit I can see to waiting is if there were a chance that there was going to be some change in the legislation, or if it would make the market more competitive for us. I don't see any change in the legislation, so I think that what we have is what we have until 2014. In terms of market competitiveness, I can't even really guess at that. It's been the same group of firms that's been around for a while now. Heinfeld & Meach is actually fairly new to it because Pat went from her old firm to this one, so they added a player to the market, which is nice for competitiveness. I don't know that you can wait too long just because of the length of time that this is required to take. One time, just because we were losing our minds in a conference room at my office trying to generate this bill, or generate the amendments to this bill, we just did a diagram of how long it was going to be, and it was about 270 days. So from beginning to end, to get your program in place is most of, the better part of a year, 2/3 of a year, so you really don't have a lot of leeway in there. You could start it late in 2012 and get there on time, but once you start to get into 13, you're getting close.
Any other questions regarding the ordinance? Yeah, I don't think we have a motion on this yet, do we? Okay. We get a motion to approve ordinance 1111 adopting the transitional impact fee schedules effective January 1, 2012.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Appreciate the reluctance. And anyone from the public on this? I don't know if I had asked that.
No, sir.
All right, any other discussion on the ordinance? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Mayor, 6-0.
All right, thank you. Thank you. And That brings us to item 13, council discussion direction interim town manager. Nothing on that item. Item 14, summary, council request and report on recent activity by the interim town manager, finance director Julie Giddy.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to get back to the council to give them a copy of the final professional services agreement with the incubator before it gets signed, and also include the SPAC revisions to the strategic plan in the goal setting, for discussion in the goal setting retreat in January.
Good. And perhaps based on our one public comment tonight, Ms. Bordeaux, make sure she's plugged in so that she can offer her assistance in the areas that she offered.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Dickey, Vice Mayor Dickey, you...
Oh, you're not going to do it?
No.
Oh. Okay, Mayor, I thought you were going to give this
thought you
report.
were. I thought you were.
You asked me for notes.
Oh, sorry.
The mayor and I went to the state of our state that was given last week, I believe. And I had made a couple of copies of some stuff so that, and it was put in your mailboxes so you could see it. But basically, one of them was the tasks ahead. They did give us like a kind of a carry-away. This was the Morrison Institute, it was called Arizona Indicators, arizonaindicators.org. Pretty extensive meeting there. The council was invited, by the way, at no cost, so I wanted to let you know that the mayor and I attended Morrison Institute. It was on November 30th. Some of the speakers were Michael Crow, Sandra Day O'Connor was there, Grady Gamage, and then there were panels that were dealing with tax structures, sustainable revenue, and we liked the one that was called How Cities Can Lead the Way Forward, and that was Mesa Mayor Scott Smith and Mayor-elect Greg Stanton. Now, Smith in particular spoke about the need for infrastructure and attracting businesses to our state, ability to find skilled people, investments in roads and transportation, higher ed, broad-based economic development, and government processes, and that all those things were amenable to success. And a lot of the discussion revolved around education as an economic development tool and a sustaining factor, as opposed to what I think Grady Gamage spoke a lot about government. He was talking about something called the social contract, and again, the question of the hour, which is what is government's role in these things. For example, what used to be understood public responsibilities in the past, such as education and roads and clean air and such, is getting questioned along with parks and health and safety nets and those kind of things. And Gamage said something like you can't have a public-private partnership if you don't have any public at all. To sum up the leaders, and he has a book actually called Bird on Fire, which is appropriately about Phoenix, and the comparatively low performance of Arizona on many of the indicators, and again, to be motivated to tackle strategic planning on a state level instead of short-term, and instead of on unsustainable fixes. We were asked to act responsibly in a regional way, and the speech was really good, and I don't know if it's available. I was going to try to get on the website to see if it was of Grady Gamage. It was kind of wrapped up the whole thing, and it was really interesting and really worth hearing. So I'll see if I can get a hold of that.
Very entertaining, too. He's quite a speaker. All right. Thank you, and sorry. I thought you were going to be given that one, and thank you. You did a great job. It was very interesting. Lots of good information on that website and in that packet. All right, now look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.